It was a cold night of January. The wind was blowing so strongly that it seemed as if the entire forest was shaking. There was snow everywhere, thick and white, covering the trees and the ground completely. The long road ahead looked endless, disappearing slowly into the fog. I was driving my car on that deserted road, and my wife was sitting beside me, quietly watching the snow outside the window. We were returning to our village after spending a few days in the city. The clock on the dashboard showed 11 o'clock at night, and apart from the humming of the car's engine, there was no sound anywhere. The world outside looked lifeless, frozen. After driving for some distance, my wife said softly, "Isn't it strange? We haven't seen a single vehicle for such a long time." I smiled and replied, "This road is always deserted at night. Because of the cold and the snow, people avoid traveling here." She nodded slightly, but her face showed uneasiness. She kept looking outside as if searching for something in the darkness. Around 15 minutes later, we saw a faint orange light flickering in the distance. It looked like a small hut, or maybe a roadside shop. As we got closer, we saw a wooden board half buried in snow, hanging loosely on a nail. On it was written, "Hot bread and lentils." The sight of that board gave us relief. I stopped the car near the hut, turned off the engine, and we stepped out. The cold wind hit our faces like needles, and we quickly ran toward the little shop. As soon as we entered, the warmth of fire touched our faces, giving comfort after the freezing wind outside. Inside, an old man was sitting near a clay stove, roasting bread over the fire. His face was wrinkled, his beard white, and his eyes glowed strangely in the dim light. He looked up slowly, smiled faintly, and said in a low voice, "Come, son, sit near the fire." We both sat close to the warmth, stretching our cold hands toward the flames. The old man then asked, "From where are you coming at such an hour?" I said, "We are coming from the city and going to our village." He nodded, then said slowly, "You will get food here. I will prepare it right now. But remember one thing, leave before you finish your meal." I was surprised and laughed lightly, asking, "Why, Baba? Is this place haunted?" He did not reply. He turned toward the fire again and began humming an old tune, slow and strange, echoing in the silent hut. The smell of roasting bread spread through the air. My wife whispered, "There's something odd about this place." I said, "Don't worry, we'll eat and leave soon." The fire crackled, and the shadows on the wall danced with every flicker. Outside, the wind roared again, louder this time, as if warning us of something we couldn't see. After a while, the old man placed a plate before us. There were 2 hot breads, a bowl of lentils, and some pickles. The smell was so good that it made my stomach growl. We started eating in silence. The food was delicious, warm, and comforting in that freezing night. The bread was soft, and the lentils had a taste of home. But even while eating, I felt a strange heaviness in the air, as if something invisible was watching us. The old man sat quietly near the stove, humming the same tune again. His eyes were fixed on the fire, not on us. I asked softly, "Baba, do you live here alone?" He paused for a moment before answering. "Yes, alone, for many years now. No one lives in this forest anymore." His tone was calm, but it carried something hidden, like fear or guilt. Outside, the wind grew stronger, and the door started shaking. The firelight dimmed for a second. My wife looked at me nervously and said, "Did you hear that?" I listened carefully. At first, I thought it was just the wind, but then came another sound, faint yet clear, from behind the kitchen door. It was the sound of footsteps, slow, dragging, uneven. Thud, thud, thud. The old man's humming stopped at once. He froze, his eyes widened, and his lips began to tremble. "Eat quickly," he said in a trembling voice. "And don't turn around." I stared at him, confused. "What happened, Baba?" I asked. He didn't answer. My wife grabbed my hand tightly. "Let's leave," she whispered. But before we could move, 3 knocks came from the kitchen door. Thud, thud, thud. The old man shut his eyes tightly and murmured, "She's awake." I felt cold sweat on my forehead. "Who?" I asked in a shaking voice. The old man slowly turned his head toward the door and whispered, "The woman in the kitchen." The door opened slowly with a long creaking sound. A cold gust of wind rushed inside, making the fire flicker wildly. My wife screamed softly and held my arm. I turned my head, and at that very moment my heart almost stopped. A woman was standing at the doorway, silent, motionless. Her face was partly burned, her lips twisted in a strange smile. Snowflakes swirled around her body, yet none of them seemed to touch her. Her presence made the whole hut feel colder than the night outside. The old man's face turned pale. His lips moved, but no words came out. The old man's voice finally broke through the silence. It trembled as he said, "She comes whenever someone breaks the rule, whenever someone finishes the meal completely." I couldn't understand what he meant. "What rule? What are you talking about?" I asked in confusion. He looked straight at me, eyes wide with fear, and whispered, "I warned you to leave before you finish your food." My wife looked down at her plate. Only one small piece of bread was left. She hadn't realized she was about to take the last bite. I shouted, "Stop! Don't eat that!" But before she could react, the woman moved. Her body twisted unnaturally as she glided across the floor, her hair spreading like black smoke behind her. The old man threw a burning log from the fire toward her, but it went right through, like she was made of smoke and shadow. The woman came closer to my wife. Her burned face was now only inches away. She whispered in a chilling voice, "You took the last bite." My wife screamed, her voice echoing through the hut like a cry from another world. Suddenly, the fire went out completely. Darkness filled the hut. The only sound was the howling wind and that horrible voice. Slow, echoing, almost inside my head. "You shouldn't have eaten it." Something cold brushed against my neck. I turned around but saw nothing. The darkness felt alive. Then I heard my wife's voice, distant, fading. "Help me!" I shouted her name again and again, but there was no answer, only silence and that dreadful humming of the old man, now turning into a cry. When I opened my eyes, everything was quiet. The fire had completely died out. Only faint light came through the cracks of the wooden walls. For a moment, I couldn't understand where I was. My head was spinning, and my hands were cold like ice. I called out my wife's name again and again, but there was no reply. The place felt empty. The chair she had been sitting on was overturned. Her shawl lay near the stove, half burned. I felt a sharp pain in my chest. I looked around the room, but there was no sign of her anywhere. The old man was sitting silently in the corner, his face hidden in his hands. I ran to him and shouted, "Where is my wife? Where did she go?" He didn't raise his head. He just said in a low, trembling voice, "I told you to leave before finishing your meal. No one listens." I grabbed his shoulder angrily. "What are you saying? What happened to her?" The old man finally looked up. His eyes were full of tears and fear. He said slowly, "She took the last bite. The woman in the kitchen, she was my wife once. Many years ago, we ran this place together. One winter night, a traveler ate all the food without thanking her. She cursed him, but the curse turned on her instead. Now she wanders here, feeding on whoever breaks the same rule." I stood frozen, unable to speak. The old man continued, "I tried to stop her for years, but every time someone eats the last bite, she comes for them. Last night, she took your wife too." His words echoed in my head like thunder. Tears filled my eyes. Before I could say anything, a sudden gust of wind blew the door open. Cold air rushed inside. I turned to look, but the hut was empty. No old man, no fire, no furniture. I was standing alone in the middle of the snowy road. Only silence and white fog surrounded me. The car was parked a few meters away. I rushed to it, shouting my wife's name, but no sound came back. Then, as I opened the car door, I saw something on the seat. Piece of bread, half burned, and on it, a single fresh bite mark. I stared at that half-burned piece of bread, unable to breathe. The bite mark looked fresh, as if someone had just taken it moments ago. My hands began to shake, and the snow outside kept falling silently. The world felt unreal, like a dream that I couldn't wake up from. My wife's voice still echoed faintly in my ears, calling my name, fading slowly into nothingness. I picked up the bread with trembling hands. It was still warm. My eyes widened in disbelief. That meant she had been here only moments ago. I looked around desperately, shouting her name, but there was no one in sight, only the white emptiness of snow stretching endlessly across the road. I turned back toward the hut, but it was gone. In its place stood only a few broken wooden planks half buried under the snow. There was no smoke, no fire, no trace of life. I rubbed my eyes, thinking I was hallucinating. But it was true. The hut had vanished. The same spot where I had eaten, where the old man had spoken, where that woman had appeared. It was now just an empty patch of snow. My breath came out in white clouds, quick and shaky. The cold was biting deeper now, and the silence around me was unbearable. I felt completely alone, lost in the middle of nowhere. Then, faintly from far behind me, I heard a voice. The same humming I had heard inside the hut. The same old tune. I turned around sharply, but there was nothing there. Just fog. But the sound was getting closer. My heart began pounding. I could feel something moving through the fog, something unseen. I ran toward the car, my shoes sinking in the thick snow. I opened the door, jumped inside, and slammed it shut. My hands were trembling so badly that I could barely put the key in the ignition. The engine coughed once, twice, then started. I pressed the accelerator hard. The car sped forward through the blinding white road, but even over the roar of the engine I could still hear that humming, faint, echoing, following me. As I drove faster, I dared to look in the rearview mirror. My blood froze. In the mirror, I saw the faint outline of the hut again, standing there in the distance, exactly as before, with a faint orange glow inside. And by the door stood a shadow, tall, still, watching me leave. The same burned woman. Her eyes glowed faintly in the darkness, and her lips curved into that same twisted smile. I blinked and she was gone. Only fog remained. My heart sank as realization struck. The curse was not bound to the hut. It was bound to me. From that night onward, I have never eaten a full meal again. I always leave one bite behind, untouched, because somewhere in the silence of the night I can still hear her whisper, "You took the last bite."